For more insights, we are joined by Alex Hamerstone. He's GRC practice lead at Trusted Sec, and he joins us from Cleveland, Ohio today. So, Alex, we have an investigation that's revealed how tech can be used as a weapon. And in a sense, it's not the first time, or perhaps not the last, that such high-profile targets, such as President Macron, have been targeted. What makes this particular incident so alarming?
I think the absolute breadth of it and the number of people that we're seeing, and of course, the fact that it's world leaders being involved in this. And what's fascinating is that for so many years, to spy on people, you had to, go to great lengths and install devices, where they lived or where they worked or things like that. And now they're able to do it using a device that you carry with you all the time, right in your pocket.
That's pretty frightening. Alex, Israeli observers have noted that the country has a track record of using cutting-edge tech and weaponry to actually cultivate diplomatic relations, for example, in Africa and the Middle East. Do you think Pegasus is just an evolution of that? And could this backfire for Israel as their tools are seen as more oppressive rather than empowering?
And there's always going to be a challenge for any nation, that houses a company that has a tool like this. There's certainly other countries that do it as well and offer these types of tools. But I do think, just the breadth of the number of world leaders that are apparently caught up in this is going to be something that's really going to change the conversation and maybe lead to some changes.
Right. What sort of changes are you envisioning here, and what sort of changes in that conversation? Because the thing that's been thrown up is how governments using cyber tools to target their adversaries, given the Pegasus incident, can really be misused or abused here. Are we talking about more controls on private spyware firms, more, regulation from U.S. authorities or even U.S. allies?
So certainly these things are tough to contain. Really, I think what many people don't realize is that a lot of these software and a lot of these, they use what are called zero-day attacks. And so attacks that are unknown to the manufacturers and software developers, mean they've had 0 days to fix it. And there's a huge market for this. And it's not just companies that we hear about or governments that have access to these. It's lots of other organizations. And so it's more likely that there are other, capabilities out there that are able to do something similar that we're just not hearing about. So while this may lead to increased scrutiny or even regulation or other types of, action, it's unlikely to stop, what's really happening on the underground and what's really possible these days.
That leads nicely into my next question, Alex. Under Israeli law, exporting these types of products is not illegal. And as you point out, there is a market for them. And some argue, look, the world is dominated by dictatorships, and surveillance tools such as this fulfill a very real need. So how do you balance those market demands with moral considerations?
So you certainly hope that, any organization that's selling a tool like this is vetting the governments that it sells them to. The challenge is that the laws and who's considered a terrorist or what it may be can be very different given different governments. So a lot of times it can be really challenging to ensure that the nations that you're sharing these types of software with are going to align with your values. And once you sell it to somebody, it's very difficult to control how they use it. And they may not be using it in ways that you would agree with as the seller. And so it certainly is going to be a very significant challenge.
You talked about earlier how in this sense, the technology has evolved in such a way that perhaps the regulation, the scrutiny might not be able to catch up in time. In this environment, how do we ensure corporate security, personal privacy is maintained?
It's incredibly difficult, and the regulations and the laws and, even a lot of the technologies that we use to protect things are not, keeping up with some of the adversaries. And certainly laws are way behind a lot of the technologies we use. Oftentimes laws are written for the way things were 30 years ago or 10 years ago or longer. And they just don't necessarily apply to these new situations where instead of having to go, out of your house and have someone steal your wallet, you can now have somebody halfway around the world rob you while you're sitting in your living room. And so all these things in the world has really changed. And it's really an overused expression. I think that the world is flat, but it truly is. Here we are speaking, halfway around the world. And, and years ago that wasn't possible. So there are just all these new technologies and new connections, which can be used for so many great things, but they can also be used for a lot of crimes and evil as well.
All right, Alex, thanks very much for coming on and sharing your insights with us. Alex Hamerstone of Trusted Sec speaking to us today.